In this lesson, we are going to look at variables, how we create variables, and then how we store information in those variables and how we use them. So first of all, a variable is declared in JavaScript by using the keyword var. We can also use the keyword let, but we're going to get to that later in the course. So for right now, we're just going to use var. And then we need to give it a name. So let's say my variable's name is my name. And then I can set it equal to something. So var my name equals Mr. Wiles. So in JavaScript, I gotta remember to put my semicolon, there we go. So in JavaScript, this is how we create a variable. Var, and then whatever the variable name is, equals, and then whatever. So I could also do this in 2 lines. I could have just ended right there and just created my variable and just save that for later and then added information later. And if I do that, then what I would do later in my script is I would just say my name equals and then assign the value. So basically what's happening here is when you create the variable, it's creating a space in memory set aside for whatever's going to be stored there. And then basically, you can think of it like a box that's labeled my name sitting there, and then when we come later and say, hey, pull out box my name and put Mr. Wiles in there, and it stores it. Then if I want to retrieve that information and I want to write it out, I could do something like this. I could say document.write and then my name. I'm not putting quotes around it. When we looked at doing strings, we made sure we always put quotes around. But if I put the quotes around that, oops, hit the wrong key. There we go. So if I put quotes around it and now view this, and bring this over here, okay, it's actually printing out just the word my name, which is obviously not what I want. I want it to print out Mr. Wiles. And that's because the quotes, anything that's in there is just treated like a string. It's saying, just print this out exactly as what's in there. But when I remove the quotes, well, now I'm looking for a variable with the name, my name, and then I'm retrieving the string, Mr. Wiles, which is in quotes, and then printing that out. So if I save that, refresh it, there we go. Now it's bringing up Mr. Wiles instead of my name. So that is how we create the variable. That is how we call the variable. I could then change it. My name equals, let's say Santa Claus. There we go. And then if I'll just go ahead and copy that line and paste it again. So if I were to do something like this, refresh. All right, so I now have Mr. Wiles and Santa Claus. So initially, my name is Mr. Wiles. It prints that. And then my name gets changed to Santa Claus, and then it prints again. So that is how we can then update variables throughout our code as well. So last part of this lesson then is what are valid variable names. So valid variable names in JavaScript. Let me just go ahead and get rid of these, and then I'll start making some comments down here as to what's valid. So a variable name, my name was obviously valid, it worked. But what if I put a space in there? Is it still valid? Well, no, we can see that we're getting an error. There's something wrong with this, and the problem is that it's a space. So variable names cannot contain spaces. Okay, so that's the first rule when creating it. So if I have multiple words in there, like say this is my first name, camel case is a common naming convention used in a lot of programming languages and is used in JavaScript. And that just means I start with a lowercase letter. I can start with uppercase. That's not a rule that you have to start with lowercase. So I mean, this is valid. We see that we're not getting any errors. But typically people start with lowercase first letter, and then to make it easier to tell when I'm starting a new word, make it easier to read, each new word starts with a capital. So that's one way that it could be done, and this is all valid. Another valid way to do this is to separate them by underscores. A lot of people like to do this. This isn't as common in JavaScript. That is common in some other languages where we separate words with underscores. So underscores are valid. Dollar signs are valid. But those are the only symbols that are valid. If I try to put any other symbol in here, like let's say the dash, I'm going to get an error. It doesn't like it. So you can see that it's got the red squiggly underline. If I try to put a hashtag in, doesn't like it. So my valid symbols are, or my valid characters, are the $sign. Oops, and I hit the wrong one. $sign, the underscore, and I'll just go ahead and write that out. Underscore and letters. But what about numbers? Can I put numbers in? Well, let me go back to my original name here where I just use my camel case since that's the conventional. So let's say I put my first name 10. Are we getting any errors? No. So numbers are also valid. And letters, I should specify uppercase, lowercase. You can use either one. Now, here is one caveat to numbers. Let's say I do 10, my first name. Now I've got a problem. I'm getting an error. It says an identifier keyword cannot immediately follow a numeric literal. So it's basically just saying I can't start with a number. So valid characters are the $sign, underscore, letters, and numbers. However, variable names can only start with, and I'll just go ahead and copy this. There you go, $sign, underscore, letters. Can't start with a number. You can start with any of the other valid ones, just can't start with a number in JavaScript. So as long as you follow those rules when you're creating your variable names, and this also applies to function names, then everything will be okay. All right, so hopefully you're fairly clear now on variables. Next lesson, we'll look at what it means for JavaScript to be typed versus untyped language.